Friends, good evening. Welcome everyone to another lecture in our first chamber series. And we continue with our seminar on the causes of illnesses working with elemental magic. Tonight, we're going into the third of the 5 causes of illness. This is called the ENS espiritual, or the entity of the spirit. And to start, let's go ahead and do this by revisiting some good old stories. In South America, in one of these lands where the great mamas are responsible for not only the custody of the wisdom, but the education of those who are worthy of it, they used to conserve some very ancient relics. These relics, belonging to their ancestors, were of tremendous value. And some others from neighboring tribes, neighboring villages, decided that they were going to steal the relics. So one night, those foreign ones from those nearby villages decided to break into some homes, and they stole the sacred relics of these great people. One of the mamas stood up, and he stated, "In the night of the full moon, you have until that night to bring us back our relics. If you do not do that, we will burn your village to the ground." And of course, the foreign ones decided to just not pay attention. They thought maybe that is just too impossible. Who would do that to us? Maybe they thought it is completely unreasonable. Anyone can just claim that they're going to burn our villages. But it so happens that when the night arrived and the relics had not shown up, fires started manifesting in different areas of the village. And even though they tried their hardest and their very best to extinguish the fires, these fires were unextinguishable. And what was most amazing is that the fires were actually taking place in those homes where the sacred relics were being kept. Of course, at that moment, those foreign ones from those nearby villages came out saying, "Stop, we cannot control this. Take back your relics." And they brought the relics back. And at that moment, the fires ceased. Of course, this sounds a little fantastic, but it only sounds fantastic for those who have not had the true experience of working with the elemental forces of nature. It so happens that fire, the same thing as water, earth, air, etc., are condensations of the ether. The ether in the sacred scriptures is known as the shamayim. And the shamayim are those waters of above that Moses speaks of in the book of Genesis. That shamayim, that ocean of fire, is beautifully personified in the form of Akasha Garba. Akasha Garba is the goddess, one of the goddess mothers of creation, and she appears as a Buddhist deity, so beautiful, navigating the ocean of fire on a beautiful fish, on a beautiful, massive koi fish. Akasha, Garba, and Akasha, because when we speak of the Shamayim, when we speak of this great ocean of fire from which all of creation emerges, we're speaking specifically of Akash. And Akash is a vibration. It is a vibration of that ether. And that ether, based on the law of Epta Paraparshinok, expresses itself in 7 distinct variations. From the most dense, we have Prithvi. And Prithvi, is associated with the element of earth. Condensed Akash, in the form of Prithvi, is what we experience here as earth. More specifically, as the soil, but also as the minerals, as the rocks. And in the human body, this Prithvi is responsible for the sense of smell in the human being. Then there is apas. And apas, as a vibration of ether, condenses itself as water. As the water that we may see in the lakes, in the rivers, and also the water that we see in the seas and in the oceans. And at the level of the human being, it influences directly on our ability to taste. So now that we find ourselves here, 3 years after the emergence of a pandemic, that we know that there are so many good friends who were affected by the COVID virus and that they see some lessened use of their ability to perceive with the sense of smell, with the sense of taste. Well, now we can see how this virus has effectively exercised some kind of influence in these particular vibrations of ether, specifically at the level of the ethereal body. But let's not get there yet. There is another vibration of ether that is called vayu. And vayu, well, condenses as air. But at the level of the human being, it influences the ability to experience the sense of touch. Then there is tejas. And tejas materializes as fire. And it is what allows us to perceive fire, what allows us to perceive light. And then there is akash. And akash, that is a manifestation of ether, condenses as the ether itself, but it allows us to perceive sound. But beyond these 5, there are still 2 others. There is adi, that is the astral light, of which we spoke in our first lecture, as we spoke about the causes of illnesses, when we spoke about the ENS ASTRALE. So there is adi, that condenses itself as the astral light. And then there is samadhi. And samadhi, well, condenses itself as the cosmic mind. It becomes that tapestry in which the living mind of the all sees its creation just take form. So these are the 7 variations of ether. And now that you are more familiar with these 7 distinct vibrations, now you can see how is it that they connect, how is it that they eventually result with the flow of the ray of creation into these elements that we know as fire and water and air and earth. And these 4 elements exist outside of us as much as they exist inside of us, as much as they exist within us. But the key here is that not only they exist in their physical form, not only they exist in a way that is tangible. I mean, everybody knows that we have water in our body because our body is around 63% water. We know that there is the element of air in our body because there is motility, there is movement, there is vibration, and of course, because we consume it. It diffuses itself into the bloodstream and it helps keep the body alive and satisfy everything that has to do with the element of fire that in our body exists, well, as electricity, it exists as heat. And then there is the element of earth, of which we can easily perceive the dense substance that makes up our physicality. So yes, we can perceive them like that in a dense form, but there's no way that they can exist in a dense form if they do not exist in their more subtle ethereal aspect. Because by now we know that all of this that exists here is dual in nature. It is an aspect physical and an aspect that is energetic. So there are these 4 elements within our body. And the ethereal causes behind them that allow them to exist and manifest exist as part of our body as well. And in this previous example, where we saw the mamas just command the elementals of fire and go out there and burn a city, burn a village. Well, the same thing happens whenever we are witnessing something like a hurricane. I mean, the example of the mama, he commanded those elementals, and those elementals respond to the command. And in a hurricane, what we see is just a clash of forces, where we see elementals of air and elementals of water that have been stimulated. And in that stimulation, they have built tremendous enthusiasm. That enthusiasm results in a tremendous amount of movement, and it's like these two elements are at war with each other. And if you have ever experienced a hurricane, you know exactly how this looks. You know exactly how this sounds. You know exactly how devastating these forces are. So these elements of nature and all the elementals that exist within the elements, the salamanders that exist in the fire, the gnomes and pygmies that exist in the earth, the nereids and undines that exist in the water, the sylphs that exist on air, we should never underestimate the power that they carry. And if that is a power that exists out there and that we can witness, well, you can clearly imagine that that tremendous power also exists within each and every one of us. But in our story, we speak of a mama, and this mama, this great master, this Gnostic doctor, well, is affiliated with superior levels of consciousness. He exists at a superior level of being. And as a master of the great White Lodge, well, he has the ability to command these elementals and exercise dominion over nature. Because after all, that is the right of every developed true man. Let's not forget that the word man means hero. It means demigod. It means human form with godlike powers and faculties. That is what is a true man, which is exactly why Samael insists so much in the need for us to stop being humanoids and become men. So the white magicians have the ability to work with the elementals of nature. But I want you to think for a second about what you learned in the process of the transmigration of the souls. Remember that each one of us as a monad, we all started at the level of the mineral kingdom. And after multiple cycles, well, we achieved some degree of mastery, and then we were taken out of the mineral, where we shared as a monad a common body with many other monads. And then we were given our first individuality as a plant in the plant kingdom. And after we went through subsequent evolutionary processes that led us to be able to achieve a degree of mastery, thanks to the sacrifice of those great masters who are angels of the departments of nature, well, we were then ready to assume a more complex form. And now that we had experienced that first individuality, now we were given more complex bodies. Bodies that by themselves were an ecosystem to many other monads. Bodies that in reality, well, are a microcosmos. And as we had those bodies, now we learned about perspective. We developed the ability of experience emotion. And as we reached those higher levels, then eventually our Divine Mother gave us the human form so that we could use the forces of nature, transmute them consciously, and take the leap onto the next kingdom. And of course, with that responsibility also comes the ability of intellection and, of course, the ability to elaborate concept. Which animals, for the most part, there's not much they can do on that. So as elementals, we were always under the tutelage, the direction of these angels of the different departments of the kingdom who were teaching us. And as elementals, back then, we, and now, all of those monads that are, as part of those evolutionary processes, they seek to work with humans. They seek the opportunity to be able to serve, to put to use what they have learned. Those that are elementals of something like the fig trees, well, they have a yearning to be able to put to use some faculties of magic. Magic meaning the ability to move forces of nature and manifest phenomena. Those elementals who are part of the department of the roses, well, they are extremely powerful elementals, and they will look for an opportunity, when the opportunity is given to them, to be able to work with humans. And in their innocence, the elementals do not discriminate. They cannot tell between white and black until they go through the experience. And what that means is that these elementals will respond to the commands of the white magicians as much as they will respond to the commands of the black magicians. Perhaps you have heard Samael say before, how is it that many of these people, I'm not sure if you call them humanoids or whatever, how is it that they can awaken in darkness and for darkness? And at some point, a student asked, how is it possible that white magicians can unfold in jinn state, and witches can do it too, and black magicians can do it too? That is a wonderful question. How is it that white magicians can work with these forces of nature and black magicians can do it as well? That is another wonderful question. And dear friends, the answer behind that is two-part. The first is because whether you are a white magician or a black magician, or in our case, we as sincere seekers to become real students of Gnosis, within all of us exists the sexual creative order. And within the sexual creative order exist Christic and principles that are Christic and that correspond to the Holy Spirit. Christic principles and Holy Spirit principles. When these principles are put to use, well, we can develop faculties. We can then transmute those waters and see the fabrication of superior existential bodies. That is what gives the power. But there is a big difference, which comes as second part of the answer, on the intent with which those waters are used. Because when we work on the transmutation of those waters, knowing that we are an instrument of our innermost, and we seek to live a life in a path of superior ethics, a path of right action, right thought, and right sentiment. When we are invoking the innermost so that it is the innermost working through us, so that the innermost becomes integrated within the experience in these lower realms of creation, well, that all satisfies the tenets, the precepts of white magic. But when we decide to start making use of that, never mind the innermost, never mind the real being, and seeking to just satisfy desires, wishes, the willpower of the ego, well, of course, the ego is going to get stronger. And then that energy will become available to the ego. And it will use it for egoic, dark and tenebrous, perverse purposes. At the end of the road, well, the white magician continues to transcend and eventually reach ever more superior levels of being. And at the level of the tenebrous one, based on the gravity and the complexity of all the harm that they create, well, they will have to spend just as much in the underworld, in those inferior realms of creation, destroying those unworthy, inhumane creations, so that that consciousness can once again become purified and go back to the point of origin, meaning from the perspective of the transmigration of the souls, and start once again the mineral kingdom. So yes, these elementals, they respond to white magicians as much as they respond to the black magicians. The white magician will invoke the innermost and will ask permission, and the elemental advocate is the one who does all of the work. Eventually, those great masters, well, that elemental advocate has been integrated with the innermost and with the consciousness, and they exercise as a true bodhisattva. But the tenebrous ones, they don't operate like that. They agitate the elementals. They, on a way, instill fear and terror in the elementals. And that is how those elementals respond. But of course, you already know this. You have seen this in many movies, particularly as you were growing up. And if we bring to mind just that beautiful classic that is called Snow White, well, yes, we can see in Snow White the essence of the spiritual soul of the innermost and the innocence of the consciousness. And we can see in the seven dwarfs 7 distinct defects that we all carry within, among many others. And when it comes to the witch, we can see that when the witch presents itself, it does not present itself in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. And when she is preparing her potions, well, she is not using the essence of roses. She is not using beautiful. They are always making some kind of indication that what they will use are the eyes of this thing or the nails of the other thing or some kind of deleterious substance. You see? They will work with these elementals and torment them. And this is how they will get them to work. We need to know this, because just as those elementals are out there, they're in here as well. And because there is an ethereal aspect of them, that ethereal aspect is part of our ethereal body. And the ethereal body is what is known as the lingam sarira or the linga sharira, or any way that it may be mentioned or said in anywhere else you may have heard it. But the lingam sarira is the ethereal body. It is what Paracelsus referred to as the nexus, creating connection, nexus formativus. It creates that connection and it gives form and shape to all of these things. And our lingam sarira, our ethereal body, is made of 4 distinct ethers. It is made of a chemical ether that is responsible of all the chemical reactions that have to do with assimilation and elimination. That chemical ether is responsible for the processes of respiration. It is responsible for the processes of synthesis. We see it active within the cell as the Golgi apparatus receives the waste, and we see how the body maintains itself. That is all thanks to the chemical ether. Then there is the biological ether. Biological ether addresses all of the fundamental processes of reproduction in the body. So not only, helping create that creative water that can be used for the perpetuation of the species, but also for the processes of replication, for all of those activities that take place within the distinct stages of cellular reproduction. As you can imagine, if we are replacing all of the cells in our body on periods of around 7 years, a biological ether is of tremendous use and benefit. But these 2 ethers are of an inferior kind. There are 2 superior ethers in our body. One of them is reflective and the other one is luminous. The reflective ether is the one that deals with memory, with imagination, with willpower. Imagine how strong and powerful is that ether. And then there's the other superior ether that is known as the luminous ether. And this is the one that has to do with sensorial perceptions. So by now, many of you, have learned the conjuration of the 4, the conjuration of the 7. Perhaps you have come across a very beautiful Latin prayer that is called the Fons Alpha. Maybe you have heard about the invocation of Gabriel. Maybe you have heard about working with some elementals that they will make you invisible. Now you can understand exactly how is it that these elementals are working. Because if you are facing an enemy, or if an enemy is chasing you, seeking to harm you, and you sing a mantra like the mantra Klim Krishnaya, or you recite the Fons Alpha, well, at that moment you are making invocations that, as long as you're doing them through the innermost, it will influence the luminous ether of your enemy, and you will be standing there. People will see you, but you will be invisible to them. Wow, it's amazing. Certainly, something very amazing. So we have a physical body, and we have an ethereal body. And from this point forward, we have made this clarification in our most advanced lectures. I believe that we just don't have all of the time in the world, and why not share it here? Let's remember that the ethereal and the physical body are the same thing. They're one body. This is why Samael speaks about 4 bodies of sin, and he says physical, astral, mental, and causal. Some people say, but wait, what happened with the ethereal body? Well, the physical body and the ethereal body are one. They are individual from each other, but they are one. And it's important that we don't forget that. So damage to the ethereal body will affect the functions that correspond to the physical body. So if you alter the balance of Akash, the manifestation of ether, you affect the hearing. If you alter the harmony, the concentration, the harmony of Tejas, you affect the ability to perceive light, the ability to express that fire in the body. If you affect Vayu, the sense of tact, the sense of touch fades away. If you affect Apas, no more sense of taste. If you affect Prithvi, no more sense of smell. If you damage the ethereal body, there is a mirror effect in the physical body. And if the ethereal body is made of ethers, and you have the ethereal component of the elements of nature, anyone who is ill-intended can create damage to your ethereal body, and as a consequence, it will manifest as an illness in the physical body. Let me share with you this example. You will find this example beautifully written in Samael's book, The Occult Treatise of Occult Medicine and Practical Magic. And he speaks about how is it that many of these practitioners work with the elemental of the guasimo tree. And what they will do is that they will take a piece of a slab of meat. They will do this because, as you will learn a little later when we speak of the Pankatattva ritual, it is in red meat where we find Tejas, which is the ether of fire. So they will take a slab of this meat and they will go to the guasimo tree and they will slice the bark and they will shove that meat in there and sandwich it onto the tree with the bark, and they will command the elemental of the tree to go and attack someone else. So if one of these practitioners has some kind of conflict or hatred or whatever it is, they will take a slab of bloody meat and put it on the tree and command the elemental, and the elemental will go and hurt the other person. But if the other person knows about this as well, they will go to another gasumo tree and they will do the same thing and grab another slab of beef and sandwich it under the bark of the tree and command the elemental to go and harm the one who sent them, the original elemental. And those elementals will keep working until, listen to this, until one of them dies. This is a horrendous use of the elementals of nature. I mean, just consider for a second, what type of trauma do you not believe that you would create on an innocent elemental that you are slapping with a slab of a superior creature compared to it, that is all bloody and very strong with the substance of fire? Evidently, that has a very traumatic effect. So this is what they do with gasumo tree. But there are other good things that can be done. For example, working with the tree of Almáciga. Those of you who are native of Gemini, well, your perfume is the extract of Almáciga. It's a beautiful aroma. And they would work with this elemental to help heal somebody who is sick. And what the practitioner would do is that they will command the elemental to go heal the sick person. And what they will do is that they will take a sharp blade, and with that sharp blade, they will carve the tree as best as they can with the shape of the body of the person who is in need of the healing. And of course, the more elaborate, the better the healing. Because we know that the substance of sacrifice brings so much power behind everything that we do. So they will carve the person, and as that carving heals on the tree, so the healing is happening on the person to whom the elemental was sent to bring the healing. So as you can see here, we can balance these things, but we need to share some stuff with you, because now at this level of study, well, you are less naive. Now you have a cultural foundation of many years of studying this material, and it is important that you are familiar with this. And you need to know that anyone who's tenebrous, any practitioner of the dark arts, any black magician, any witch or sorcerer, they can bring harm through ingestion and injection. Ingestion is anything that goes in through the mouth. Injection is anything that goes in through the skin. Okay? We're not speaking about absorption. We're speaking about just penetrating the skin and delivering it to the anterior layers, to the more deeper layers of the skin, where we have that as an organ. Well, we go through the fascia and then into the muscles. See that type of activity. The tenebrous ones can cause tremendous harm. They can do this through the use of funeral substances. Samael speaks about this in detail in his treatise of occult medicine and practical magic. Funerary substances is pretty much anything that you can get from a graveyard. Deleterious substances, as is known, practices of many women who practice witchcraft, they will take of the menstrual flow and keep it. Many of them will freeze it so that it's available for whenever they need it. And they will make use of these deleterious substances, and they will blend it with food, with consumables. And with their incantations and their dark invocations and prayers, they will bring of that and give it to someone, make them very ill, fill them with parasites, and even cause death. Funeral substances like the juices that ooze from a corpse, that kind of stuff. Dirt from the cemetery. A little piece of clothing from a cadaver. We'll take any of those things and throw it in with food and give it to someone exactly as the witch in the story of Snow White. And, well, Snow White, for cinematic purposes, will fall asleep. Everyone else here will see, for real life purposes, their ethers in their ethereal body being affected, and as a consequence, their physical body will become gravely ill or die. So there is something that can be done, that the white magician can do to protect himself. This is a practice that is usually done Good Friday. In this practice, the white magician will work with the elemental of Tomasuku. And as you can see, the Tomasuku tree is a very strong, powerful tree. What they will do is that they will walk around the tree in a circle. And every sincere white magician will always create a magical circle around the elemental in which he's working. And he will always bless the tree. So they will start at the north and they will walk counterclockwise. Somebody will say, counterclockwise, but that is to the left. Isn't that black magic? No, it isn't. Because as the white magician is walking around the tree, on his right hand he will have either a magic wand that has been adequately prepared. Eventually, we will prepare our own. Or he is using his consecrated sword and he is tracing a circle. So as he's walking and tracing the circle, he or she is enclosing himself or herself in the circle with the elemental. So they walk counterclockwise, and as they trace the circle, when they get back to the south, they cross along the circle from south to north. And once there, they assemble themselves so that they are facing towards the east. They will invoke and they will work with the elemental of the Tomasuko, and they will ask, imperiously command the elemental of the Tomasuko, as you will learn that it is done always in the name of the Christ, by the power of Christ, and by the love of Christ. And they will ask to be sealed with the atoms from the elemental. And as they do this, they will go to the tree and with a very sharp blade to inflict the least amount of damage possible, they will slice a vein of the tree, and then there is a sap that will come out. They will shed their clothing, and once they are naked, they will take of this sap, and they will apply the sap throughout all of their body. And after they have done this, they will take that same cup with which they were picking the sap, and they will drink 3 cups of this sap. As a consequence, the elemental will penetrate that astral, ethereal atmosphere of the magician. And whenever there is a danger, whenever there is something of which the white magician must be protected, not only the elemental will protect the magician, but will let the magician know that he is being protected. So there would be some kind of electrical hypersensitivity where they will feel what is actually happening. They will know intuitively what's happening, and they will be adequately protected. A good example of this, Gregory Rasputin. Rasputin, as a magician, he did many great things. And in all of his greatness, well, there were some who wanted to see him dead. One time, there was a banquet. And in this banquet, someone poisoned Rasputin's cup of wine. And the moment he grabbed onto that cup, he felt that electrical tingling letting him know, yeah, this is poison. Somebody here wants to kill me. And you know what he did? He raised up his cup and he looked at his enemies and he said, with this very same cup, I toast. And he drank it. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Because such is the power of the elementals. So what have we learned tonight? Because this feels like this has been quite interesting, maybe a little amusing lecture. What have we actually learned? We have learned that the physical body and the ethereal body are the same thing. It is just that the ethereal body is the superior aspect of the physical body. And it moves itself in the fourth dimension. And not only the physical and the ethereal are the same thing, the ethereal body, being made of ethers, well, contains 4 specific types of ethers that regulate the functions of the physical body. We damage the chemical ether, we affect everything that has to do with assimilation, with nourishment, with rejection out of the body. That is a big deal. If we affect the biological ether, all of our reproductory functions will suffer. Not only the ones that are associated with our sexual organs, but also all of those reproductory activities that take place within our tissues and our cells. That is a big deal. If somebody affects the ether that is luminous, the reflective ether, well, it affects our memory. It affects our ability to exercise willpower. It affects our ability to perceive with the senses. So using the elementals, whether elementals of plants or the basic elementals of nature, these elementals can affect the ethereal body and thus bring harm, illness, suffering to the physical body. And the last thing that we learn many more things, but for the sake of brevity, we also learned that the elementals will respond both to the commands of the white and the black magicians, but that there is a tremendous difference between one and the other. White magicians will seek to work according to the will of the universal charity. They will seek to work according to the will of the real being to maintain harmony, while the tenebrous ones will torment and will agitate and exasperate these elementals and force them to work. There's a huge difference on that. So just as they, tenebrous entities, can bring harm, in the same way we can work with these elemental creatures of nature to bring healing. So I will invite you to go back and revisit our pre-chamber lecture on the chakras. Because in that lecture, not only we speak of specific mantras that allow for the vibration of those centers and bring harmony, but we also speak of the pravanas, those sacred syllables that when we utter them and we sing them, well, when we concentrate on the chakra, they bring further harmony and they allow us to harmonize those ethers in the body. Remember that the chakras receive very subtle energies from the fifth dimension of nature. They filter that energy that comes from the astral plane, and through the Burek mesh, we deliver onto the physical body and the ethereal body just the most subtle of those energies to help nourish and energize our glands in the endocrine system. Okay, but let's not get too distracted. Dear friends, this has been our lecture tonight on the causes of illness, and tonight we spoke about the entity of the spirit, or the ENS espiritual. Thank you, dear friends, everyone, for joining us here this evening, and may all beings be happy.